Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Boschman, and this is the Intentionally Intuitive podcast. In this episode, I wanted to get out a video that covers the compatibility of each life path number. And this is just going to be very high level, very quick, just to give you a general idea of how the two life paths or how each life path is sort of compatible with one another. We're going to talk about very briefly each, I'm going to say couple, but this can really pertain to friends, family, you name it. It doesn't just have to be romantic partners. But we're going to be looking at the strengths of that sort of union of those two life paths, as well as the weaknesses. And what I mean by weaknesses is simply the areas where there likely will be points of contention, where there likely will need to be greater conversation, and, where there needs to be probably some grace and understanding of each other. And so when we're talking about compatibility with numerology, and I would say the same is to be true for astrology, there are certain energies that work really well together and flow together really well, where there's not a lot of friction. There's not a lot of, again, points of contention. But then there's also energies that it is a little bit more difficult. It's kind of like, if you put fire and fire together, you're just going to get a big firestorm, which it can be great, can really work. There's a lot of strengths to that, but it can also be really highly combustible. There can be a lot of charged energy, and there can be those points of contention. It does not mean that where you have those difficulties or where you have that friction, and I would sort of equate it to like oppositions or squares in astrology, right? When you have two numbers, when they come together, there's that friction. It doesn't mean that you're not compatible or that you can't be compatible. If anything, it means when you can figure out how to work best with the strengths of each other and have the conversations and work together, you can actually really strengthen your connection and really become empowered in a lot of ways through that connection. So it's actually, sometimes the squares can be so powerful when it comes to strengthening connections, but you have to be able to show up to it in an emotionally mature way, ready to have the conversations, ready for the compromise, not sacrifice, compromise, and be willing to work it out and see it through. And a lot of times what we tend to see happening is where there's those points of contention or that friction, that's usually where the relationship tends to break down, and it becomes much more difficult to kind of see eye to eye or to stay together, so to speak. And that's why we would say they're incompatible. But the reality is that the two individuals determine whether or not that relationship will work. And the two individuals determine whether or not they are willing to do the work that is necessary to overcome those challenges. And really, when you have a compatibility reading or a synastry reading, that is really the goal, is to understand where there is that friction so that you can find the tools and figure out how to work through that friction, to calm it, to mitigate it, so that you can have a healthy connection and dynamic. A lot of times we look at compatibility and synastry in the world, and we say, oh, okay, well, if my numbers don't match, or if my synastry doesn't look good, or it's not a match with this person, then we're incompatible and I'm not interested. But we're kind of missing the point of compatibility and synastry. It's really to help to move through the growth and the evolution of those connections. It really, relationships are our greatest teachers. Those are the connections that help us to learn the most about ourselves, especially when there are, again, in astrology, squares and oppositions, or in numerology where there's, two numbers coming together, that there will definitely be points of contention to work through. And unless both parties are sort of highly evolved and in their higher expression of their energies all the time. So I want you to just use this as a very basic, very general tool just to gain a better understanding about, okay, so somebody with, if I'm friends with or a family member has, this particular number and I'm this number, this is potentially what could present, right? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses that could potentially present? And then it's up to you to decide, with that other person, how you will do the work to make it work, right? And that's why they say relationships take work. It's those points of contention or that friction that can absolutely be managed, that can absolutely be mitigated, but it takes work. And that's why we say relationships take work. So I hope that you'll find this to be a useful tool. Again, very high level, very basic, very quick, but it's just to kind of give you a taste of what to kind of look out for. Now, if you want to take a deep dive, because there's no way I could spend so much time talking about the compatibility for each life path number, but that's not really something I'm interested in doing for a video. So this is, again, just to kind of give you a taste, but if you are interested in diving much deeper into your synastry and your compatibility reports for numerology as well as astrology, then I do offer a service on my website that's Love Languages with Numerology. And again, it can be used for romantic couples, it can be used for family, friends, whatever. We can look at the synastry and the compatibility. And then you can gain a deeper understanding, again, where those points of contention might be. And some of them can be very difficult to overcome. And it will take a lot of growth and a lot of evolution and a lot of strength to overcome them. But it just depends on, is it worth it to you or not? And so we can help you to understand where those points of contention are. And it can help you to understand what is potentially needed in order to reach a more harmonious point within your connection based on those points of contention, right? And how to best work through them. So I do offer that on my website if that's something you're interested in diving deeper into. But for now, we're just going to kind of look at each life path number and the compatibility with the other life path numbers. Also keep in mind the points that I'm going to make today for each of these life path numbers are not all inclusive. Like there's so many things that can be said for each connection that we just don't have the time to do in this video. But again, you can definitely go much deeper with a personal reading. Also, timestamps will be available in the description box. All right, let's take a look. Life path 1 with life path 1. So some of the more difficult connections can be those where we have the same life path numbers. They can be really beautiful, but there can be a struggle to get to that point of beauty. And so ones with ones, you've got two very ambitious, very strong, very leadership type of energies coming together. Two energies that are meant to be very much focused on self in this lifetime. So when you have that together, if both are in their higher octaves, then you have a situation where they can support one another as they move towards their ambitions. They understand the journey. They understand the need for, being the trailblazer and moving through self-doubt. And so you have someone, a partner in crime, so to speak, who gets it. And that can make a big difference when it comes to taking a leap of faith, going out on a limb, going after with your biggest dreams. Where this can be challenging is if you're still in the lower vibrations of your one energy, then it can be clash of the titans. It can be clash of the ego. Two people who need to be, where it needs to be about them, very much both in their ego. And so there can be that if both people are moving through their self-doubt and sort of in victim mode, you don't have someone else who can support you in your time of need and help to get you out of it. You just have someone that's kind of feeding into it. So it can be very challenging to, again, find your motivation, be ambitious, go after your dreams, speak up for yourself when you have another partner who's trying to do the same and needs just as much as attention and focus and support as you need. It can be a little bit of a clash of the titans. And so it can definitely be a point of contention. But again, strengths are very strong when you get to that point of coming together. This would be two leaders coming together and sort of being that power couple. But definitely getting to that point can be a challenge for sure. The 1 and the 2 coming together can be really beautiful, but again, there's a lot of points of contention here. The beautiful parts or the strengths would be that, the 1 is someone who is going to need a lot of support, typically in this journey of life. And again, helping them move through their self-doubt, etc. And the 2 is a nurturer. There's someone who's used to giving and finding the balance and being supportive in a lot of ways. And so, when they come together, it's beautiful synergy. And, the 1 allows the 2 to be supportive and show up in that way, which actually fuels the 2. But areas where this can be points, bring in points of contention would be the 2 feeling sort of unseen, not nurtured, not appreciated, because a lot of the 1 energy, again, is very self-motivated. It's very much tuned into self, and it can be more direct and honest in its approach. And so it can kind of come across as insensitive at times. And that can be difficult for a 2 because the 2 is often highly sensitive. So there can be the breakdown in communication or how to best communicate. It's kind of like both have, differing love languages. And so finding that balance and finding, again, communication is going to be key with these 2 connections. But if you can find your way in this connection, it actually can be, again, a very synergistic type of connection and turn out to be very beautiful. But the 1 may find the 2 to be very highly emotional and too clingy, and the 2 may find the 1 to be insensitive and not available enough emotionally, whatever. So it can bring up some strong themes there. The 1 and the 3 actually, I think, is a really beautiful combination. It definitely can have its struggles, but I think overall it's a beautiful connection because the 1, again, is meant to be the trailblazer, use its visions, be the visionary, go out, use its ingenuity to create something in this world. Usually will move through a lot of self-doubt in that process of stepping into that leadership role. But the 3 is a creative, right? So it's very much usually tapped into its imagination, its creativity, looking for creative outlets to express that creativity. And so when the 2 come together, it's actually this beautiful synergy of sometimes of the 3 having the creative idea and sharing that, or the 1 sharing its vision and the 3 helping the 1 to create whatever that is, or working together to create something beautiful together. So again, kind of powerhouse type of powerhouse couple type of energy, or coming together, 2 people coming together with great creative ideas. And the 1 has such strong leadership energy that it can help the 3 to bring out that creativity and express itself and to make it happen, to bring that creativity to fruition. Where there might be some points of contention can be the 1 can often be more serious, again, more dedicated, more focused, sort of like, I don't want to say self-absorbed, but it is about self in this lifetime. And the 3 is really a big energy and can kind of be focused on a lot of different things and kind of lose focus and be a little scattered at times. And so it can be the 1 and the 3 coming together. The 1 can get frustrated with the 3 for not being serious or focused enough. And the 3 can get frustrated with the 1 for being too rigid, too controlling, too focused, right? And needing to let their hair down a little bit. So can kind of create a little bit of discord there at times. The 1 and the 4, these 2 actually come together really well and usually work together really well as well, because, both are very focused energy for the most part, very ambitious, very solution focused as well. And for the most part, pretty grounded. The 4 is definitely a very grounded energy, and the 1 tends to be more fire energy. So the 4 can keep the 1 more stabilized and keep the 1 from being overly impulsive, which 1s can tend to be at times. So it's a beautiful grounding type of energy that also, the 4 will benefit from because they're building something solid. They have a partner or a friend or whatever who is also very much focused and dedicated and goes after their goals and their dreams, and that's sort of very much 4 energy as well. So when they work together, what they can create is huge, phenomenal, wonderful. Also, the 4 can help the 1 overcome a lot of the self-doubt that the one will have to move through. And also, the one can help the four to pursue some of its greater goals, to step outside of its comfort zone, to think beyond, sort of a rigid game plan. And so that can be really useful for the four as well. Where they might have some issues would be, again, both can tend to be more like hyper focused when it comes to like ambition and work and that sort of thing, and the need for control as well, and perfectionism and all of that. And so when that kind of comes together, there can be some butting of heads. Both are also very highly independent for the most part, and do well in environments where there's no clinging or codependency or that sort of thing, where each are allowed to have their autonomy. So it really is beautiful in that sense. However, the need for control can sometimes come in and put a damper on things between both, right? So if you have two people who need to be able to control the environment and the situation, that can cause problems down the road. But overall, this dynamic tends to be highly compatible. The 1 and the 5 is an interesting dynamic because, the 1 is, again, the visionary. They're meant to think outside the box, be progressive, try new things. And that is very much 5 energy. 5 is the freedom seeker. It wants to, it is very much unconventional, progressive, thinks outside the box, and wants to experience life with all of its senses. And so these two coming together can actually really push one another to get out there and experience life, to try new things, to take the risk, to take the leap of faith. And they can be each other's best cheerleader in that. And that can be really beautiful. Where there might be some points of contention here would be sort of with the 1 being too impulsive, right? And the 5, also kind of being a little bit more scattered at times, to where it's kind of, fly by the seat of your pants. And so there can be a lot of like impulsivity when these two come together. And, that's great short term, but that's not sustainable. And that can actually be an Achilles heel for both the 1 and the 5. So making sure that things stay, all things in moderation and not too extreme is going to be important when the 1 and the 5 come together. But overall, really beautiful connection. The only thing else that might come up that's a point of contention, a strong point of contention, is again that the 1 tends to be more focused, more driven, and the 5 just has a lot going on. There's a lot of ideas coming in and circulating, and it's not necessarily that they can't get focused, it's that they can't necessarily stay focused at times, or they get focused, they pick something up, and then they drop it because they don't see the rewards quick enough type thing. And with the 1 needs to stay focused in order to be that trailblazer, be that visionary, to create whatever it is that they're trying to create. And so it can be, finding that balance between those two energies can be challenging at times. Also, again, the 5 likes its freedom and likes its independence. The 1 also likes its independence, but the 5 doesn't usually like to be too restricted, too conventional, play by the rules type of thing. And sometimes the 1 can need greater control over their environment. And so that clash of needing control and the extreme necessary freedom of the 5 can be a little bit of, can create some issues there. But once they get it figured out, then the 5 can help the 1 be more free within its expression. And the 1 can help the 5 become more focused and see things through to completion. The 1 and the 6 are similar to the 1 and the 2. They can be a really beautiful connection, but it will take work and it will take, constant communication. And I say that because the 1 tends to be very independent and the 6 can be more sort of interdependent, really likes to, connect with others, nurture others, and care for others, that sort of thing. And the 1 can sometimes see that as too clingy, too needy, and feel a little bit suffocated. And the 1 who tends to be more direct and honest in their approach and very sort of very ambitious, etc., and also highly independent, The six can sometimes feel unseen, unheard, feel like they're not getting the love that they want or desire, or getting their needs met necessarily. So again, it just comes down to sort of like two different kinds of love languages. So there just needs to be that conversation and continuous conversation, just to make sure both party feels seen and heard and appreciated, which can be challenging at times. Now, the other thing with this is the one, again, likes to sort of feel like they're in control of their environment. And the six does too. The six can be very protective and sometimes overly protective. So again, when you get two people coming together who need that feeling of control, there can be some clashes of the horns there, right? Some clashes of heads there. And so again, conversation is important there. Now, the beautiful strengths of this connection would be, the one, again, goes through periods of great self-doubt. And the six is such a supportive, nurturing energy that it can offer the one the support and the help them to find their confidence, so to speak. And also the one can help the six to be more assertive, to speak up for themselves, to set greater boundaries, that sort of thing, and really, again, speak up for themselves. So that can be really powerful, and it can be empowering for both parties. But again, where the difficulty lies is just making sure that there's that conversation, so that neither party really feels so the six doesn't feel neglected, and so the one doesn't feel like they're being suffocated from all of the love and nurturing that the six has to offer. The one and the seven, I think, can be a really beautiful connection for a lot of reasons. Like the seven can help the one tap into their spirituality, their higher sense of self. It can help the one to have greater self-discovery, that sort of thing. And so that can be really beautiful. And the one can help the seven to trust their intuition more, to take risks more, to get out of their head and try whatever it is that they're keeping themselves from doing or trying. Which can be really beautiful. So the one can really bring the seven out of their shell, so to speak. Whereas the seven can help the one go within. And so it kind of becomes this beautiful dynamic, to be honest. Where there could be some issues with the one and the seven is, again, both tend to be more independent. So that's actually a strength. I mean, they can work off of each other and, both feel very fulfilled with one another because both are so independent. They don't need necessarily that clinginess or that codependency. And so that's also a strength there as well. But the seven can kind of sometimes, this is a lifetime of needing a lot of support when it comes to trust. There's a lot of lessons to be learned for the seven when it comes to trusting self, trusting others, trusting the universe, etc. And so issues around trust could come up, and that can be difficult for the one who, is kind of moving through their experience of having to move through self-doubt to, be this trailblazer, etc., and might not deal very well with having to constantly reassure the seven that, they're being faithful or whatever, or that they can be trusted, etc. And so that can create some interesting dynamics there. And the insecurity of the seven, as well as the insecurities of the one, right? The self-doubt that the one is moving through, can create this dynamic where they use the insecurities that they have and they're moving through against one another. And so it can become this sort of this weird power play that just plays into the insecurities of both, right? So that can definitely create some issues. The 1 and the 8 coming together, this can really, again, be one of those dynamics where it's like the powerhouse couple, right? Like the power couple. So the strength-wise, I mean, this is like leadership and power coming together. And so, a lot of times the 8 might have the resources or the networks or the expertise that can help the 1 to, not only have their vision or sort of nurture that vision, but to create it in some way. The 8 is great about being the visionary as well and finding the solutions it needs in order to create that vision. And again, the 1 is the visionary, the trailblazer, who's meant to create something that hasn't been done before. And so these two coming together, especially in a business relationship, this would be power. This would be success. This would be very, very, very strong energy coming together. So beautiful there. And also, both the 8 and the 1 do struggle with confidence and self-doubt and taking risks. Both of these energies are very much about taking risks. So they can help each other to take those risks, to take the leap of faith, as well as to overcome that self-doubt or that lack of confidence. And that's something that they can kind of cheer each other on. They know what the other person is kind of moving through, so to speak, and they can help one another in that way to get to the goal, to reach that goal. Where there can be obviously some points of contention here is that you have 2 really strong energies coming together. So 2 really big egos coming together. And if either or both of those egos are inflated or wounded, then you have, again, just similar to the 1 with the 1, the clash of the titans, right? You have 2 egos coming together and clashing. Both need to be in control. Both need power. Both need this sense of independence and autonomy to be able to be successful and achieve their goals and all those things. And so it can almost start to become a competition between one another as opposed to working together to complete your goals together. So that's definitely something you would just have to be careful of. Also, both tend to like control of the situation. And so again, you can end up starting to control one another. And of course, that doesn't play well within connections, any kind of healthy connections. So, with 1 and 8 together, that's going to be a constant ego check just to make sure that there's compromise, there's communication, there's working together and addressing when, the competition starts to get up and get heated. So, but overall, if you all can work through the difficulties of this connection, this is a powerhouse connection, no matter how you look at it. The 1 and the 9, this is such an interesting dynamic because you have the polar opposite sides of the spectrum here. You have the 1 that this is a lifetime of focusing on self. This is a very more selfish lifetime of, following your ambitions, being assertive, speaking up for yourself, going after your dreams, no matter what it costs, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have the 9, which is on the other side of the spectrum, which is about the all. This is a very selfless lifetime where the focus is on humanitarianism, bringing people together, supporting, uplifting, empowering, inspiring others in some way. So the beauty of these 2 individuals coming together is that the 1 can help the 9 when it comes to leadership, when it comes to similar to the 6 energy, when it comes to standing up for yourself, having greater boundaries and greater standards, that sort of thing, not being taken advantage of, being the leader within your own life, continuing to take risks, even when you get burnt, that sort of thing. And the 9 can help the 1 to tap into their compassion, to tap into their being able to have the conversations to find out what is needed before I start to create whatever this is, to have those conversations with others, to build greater sense of community and to take others into consideration. So the 9 can actually help balance out the 1's energy greatly, and the 1 can help to balance out the 9's energy greatly. But in the interim, there can be, again, similar to the 2 and the 6, with the 1, there's this, the 1 is typically very hyper independent and again, can be very blunt and direct in its communication style. And the 9 tends to be more giving and sensitive and nurturing type of energy. And so the 9 can feel misunderstood, feel like the 1 doesn't see them, doesn't hear them. And there can be that lack of compassion, so to speak, from the 1. And so again, the 9 might feel like they're not being seen or heard or loved. And, the 1 might feel like the 9 is too clingy and too needy or too codependent, when in actuality, again, it's just a different kind of love language. And so again, conversation and understanding is going to be needed in order for these two to come together and to work together in a beautiful, harmonious way. But when they can do that, it can be incredibly beautiful. Like the 9 brings the vision for the humanitarian effort, and the 1 has the solution or the vision to make it happen. And so it can be a really beautiful connection in that sense. But, again, because they're on the opposite sides of the spectrum, it can be a little bit difficult to come together. And there's definitely lots of points of contention to move through. Life path 2 with life path 2. So this is a really beautiful connection in that you have essentially 2 givers coming together. So these are 2 people who typically, again, especially when they're in their higher expression, are able to, be the observer, see where the disconnect is, bring the connection, bring the balance and the harmony. And it's a very nurturing, but also communicative, very loving energy that brings people together. So you have 2 of these come together. It's, again, very strong giving energy. And you'd be able to read your partner or your friend and understand what they need, sometimes before they understand what they need. So again, this is a very supportive, nurturing type of dynamic. However, where this can become, again, sort of a point of contention, especially when you have 2 people who have the same life path number moving through the same experiences or same storylines, both people would tend to be more hypersensitive and would have to be moving through figuring out how to become emotionally mature and handle those extreme emotions. And if you get 2 people together who are unable to manage their emotions, then that can create a lot of victim mentality, a lot of arguments where, both either feel unseen, heard, appreciated, all of the things, or again, need to play the victim in the role. Also, there's sometimes when you have 2 givers together, it can feel a little bit challenging because both need to work on receiving. And when you're in a dynamic where both are givers, and both don't enjoy receiving, it can be a little bit challenging in that sense as well. There doesn't tend to be a whole lot of opportunities to practice receiving within that connection, within that dynamic. And that can become a point of contention. Life path 2 with life path 3, I typically see this as a really strong connection for the most part. These are 2 really compatible energies. You have the 2, which is about relationships, balance, harmony, coming together. And then you have the 3, which is also very much a social type of energy and typically is good with social environments, connecting with others, collaborations, that sort of thing, communication. And so, this tends to be a typically really beautiful connection with not a lot of issues to kind of be worked through or difficult aspects to be worked through. Some things that could come up are, when it comes to making decisions, the 2 can sometimes struggle with being decisive. The 3, not so much struggling with being decisive, but there's usually so many things and different things to choose from that they can become overwhelmed. And also the 3 can struggle with minimizing themselves or who they are and having a fear of being seen or shining, that sort of thing, or being successful, that sort of thing. Or expressing their unique self and who they came here to be. So it can be a little bit challenging when it comes to either speaking up for themselves or being decisive or, again, making very sound decisions. And both could tend to be, through various stages, very easily influenced by each other or the outside world. And that can affect that connection to some degree. But overall, I think the 2 and the 3 typically, work well together. And, the 3 usually has a strong lust for life, is very imaginative, creative, all those things. And the 2 is someone where, most people feel really safe in the 2's presence and connecting with the 2 and sharing about their own experiences, all those things. So again, and the 3 loves to communicate for the most part. So again, overall, 2 and 3, just a really beautiful connection. So I think that there's definitely going to be things you'll have to work through as a couple or as friends or whatever, but I think the 2 and the 3 can pretty much handle whatever gets thrown their way, as long as they're not easily influenced by the external or each other, and both are able to maintain their uniqueness, their autonomy. Then this can be a really solid connection. The 2 and the 4, again, can be a really beautiful connection. The 2 and the 4 are also part of what's called the manifesting triad. So these two tend to work together really, really well and really tend to connect really, really well. The 4 is a very grounded, loyal, committed type of energy. The 2 is looking for sound relationships, balance, peace, harmony, that sort of thing. And the 4 usually can deliver on that pretty well. So usually this is a very solid type of connection. Where there can be some points of contention would be the 4 tends to be more like hyper independent and very focused, very dedicated, especially when it comes to like work or their creative outputs. And, sometimes they can be more focused on their work than their relationships. And the 2 is more typically focused on the relationship and is more about, again, those connections and those deeper connections. So the 2 might have a little bit more of a problem sort of losing themselves within the connection and also not being seen or heard by the 4 because the 2 needs more out of the connection than what the 4 is able to give. Sometimes the 4 can come across as aloof or emotionally detached, and that can, the 2 tends to be more sensitive and outwardly sensitive. And so, there can be some clashes there when it comes to the 2 being or feeling like they're being seen, heard, and, loved, and the 4 having difficulty sort of expressing that love in a way that, calms the nerves of the 2. So, there's just that making sure that each are expressing their love languages and making sure that there's that communication so that both are feeling heard and understood, while also being able to maintain autonomy and that independence while also that interdependence. But overall, really beautiful energy, especially when it's a work or a business partnership. What you can create together can be very powerful and very profound. Yeah, I like this energy together, but there's definitely, when it comes to, the 2 definitely has a easier time expressing their emotions than the 4 does. And when it comes to, again, sharing that space, there can be some points of contention there. The 2 can help the 4 work with their emotions and vice versa. So, it can be a powerful dynamic there, but it's getting to that point. So that would definitely require a lot of conversations and communication. The 2 and the 5. Okay, so this, for the most part, I think this is a really beautiful dynamic. I don't think there's a whole lot of points of contention. However, there is this aspect with the 5 that definitely the 5 needs its freedom, and it can affect their relationships to some degree because they are typically very independent individuals. And anytime they feel sort of like, sometimes they struggle with relationships just because they need that independence. And if they have someone who's too codependent or too clingy or tries to control the dynamic too much or tries to control them too much, they can sabotage the connection and to get that freedom back, to break free. And so the 2 is someone typically who is a giver, who is more doting, who is very focused for the most part on relationships to some degree, and connectivity, that sort of thing. And most people feel very comfortable in a 2's presence and opening up to a 2, that sort of thing. But the 2 can also be highly sensitive and deeply emotional. And when it comes to relationships with the 2 and the 5 might see the 2 as a little bit too clingy, too needy, too invested in the connection, where it's almost like codependency. And that can kind of freak out the 5, and the 5 needs its space. So it could sabotage the connection in some way. But as long as the 2 doesn't lose itself within the 5, and each individual has their own space and is whole and brings, their everything they have to offer to the table and can walk in tandem with one another, then the 2 and the 5 can actually be a beautiful union or connection, because the 5 brings the freedom and helps the 2 to learn to express itself in a healthy way. And, the 5 also helps the 2 to think outside the box and not be too rigid in its thinking, that sort of thing. So that can be really beautiful. And the 2 helps the 5 to be more interdependent and connect with others on a deeper level. Because again, the 5 can sometimes struggle with really needing that hyper independence, and that can affect relationships. So as long as there's the communication where, the 5 doesn't have to constantly worrying about, making the 2 feel confident in their connection and work through their insecurities, that sort of thing, it can be a beautiful dynamic, but it can definitely bring up a point of contention when it comes to the love languages of both individual. And so you just want to make sure that you are having those conversations and making sure that each person is being heard and respected in that way. The 2 and the 6, this can actually be a really beautiful connection because you have, again, similar to the 2 and the 2, you have 2 givers. These are 2 people who typically are givers. They are nurturers. They want to bring peace and harmony and balance to connections. And the 6 is all about, truth, honesty, love, and it's a very nurturing type of energy, especially when it's in its higher octave. So these 2 coming together, you basically have the heart energy and, nurturing energy coming together. So it's incredibly beautiful. Where there can be some points of contention, though, especially when both parties or one party is in their lower octave or their lower vibration, is losing themselves in each other, like basically losing themselves and their own sense of self within that connection, right? Where the relationship becomes their whole identity. And, they become consumed with making sure the other person is happy and giving, but also not taking a lot, not really investing in their sense of self or their own identity and their own independence, right? So it can kind of become almost a codependent connection that can become unhealthy if both people aren't showing up independently, right? So that can definitely be something that would need to be, continuously addressed. Just because, again, you have 2 strong givers coming together. So there's not a lot of practice in receiving. And so that can become a little bit challenging where both could feel like they're being taken advantage of to some degree. But really, it's just there's not sort of that equal exchange of energy. And they've sort of lost themselves within the other person to the point where they don't even recognize who they are or what their likes are, what their desires are, what they want out of life, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really the biggest point of contention with the 2 and the 6 is losing themselves within one another and losing their sense of identity and again, who they are, what they want, their goals, that sort of thing. And having higher standards, having healthy boundaries, that sort of thing. So it would have to be a very conscious decision by both parties to continue to, do the self-exploration, continue to recognize when they're losing themselves in their partner or their friend or whatever, and bringing it back to self to make sure that they have that sense of self protected to some degree. The 2 and the 7 can be a really, again, beautiful connection with not a whole lot of points of contention. Where there might be some issues would be the 7 tends to be more independent, sort of needs its alone time, needs its time for solitude. And the 2 can be a little bit more, I don't want to say clingy, but more invested in the relationship, or it can seem like they're more invested in the relationship than the 7 sometimes. But that's not necessarily the case. It's just the 7 really does need time for self-care, self-soothing, solitude, that sort of thing, their alone time. And so if you have a 2 that is not, again, whole within themselves and has a great sense of self and identity, they could, again, lose themselves within the 7 and expect the 7 to meet all of their needs, and can kind of overwhelm the 7 probably a little bit, to where the 7 might feel a little bit suffocated. And the 7 might end up sacrificing their own needs to meet the needs of the 2, which can be challenging. Also, there's usually a lot of deep emotions with the 7, a lot going on internally. With the 2, same thing. It's a very sensitive energy. The 2 is on a journey to really be able to harness their emotions and really work with their emotions and have that level of emotional maturity. And the 7 is also kind of on that similar journey. There's a lot more introspection with the 7. And if you have 2 people who are not emotionally mature and don't know how to manage those emotions, a lot of times they'll be projected outwards, and that can come into like extreme arguments, feeling isolated, misunderstood, all of those things. And so, that's really kind of the biggest point of contention with the 2 and the 7 is making sure that you're having the conversations and that you're not being too reactive with the other person. And that's just part of the journey and figuring out how to manage your own emotions in a healthy way. But yeah, if you have 2 people who are very at a good place within themselves, then the 2 and the 7 can really bring in a beautiful connection of heart and spirituality. I mean, it can be incredibly deep and profound, beautiful connection. The 2 and the 8, this is also, so the 2 and the 8 are also part of what we call the manifesting triad. And so what these 2 can manifest together can be quite powerful and significant in this lifetime. So if this is a romantic partnership, if this is a business partnership, especially, this is a very powerhouse kind of dynamic and can produce a lot manifestation wise, especially in the material, like tangible things. The 8 is really good at having the vision, working towards that vision, making decisions, being the expert, pushing forward. The 2 is really good at bringing peace, harmony, kind of seeing eye to eye, finding the common ground, bringing the collaboration and the connectivity that's needed in order to achieve goals, that sort of thing. So it can be a really beautiful connection. Where there can be some points of contention, especially in like romantic relationships, would be, the 8 would be more dominant within the connection, more than likely. The 2 would be more sort of receptive in the connection. And so, as long as both people are okay with that kind of dynamic where the 8 is more dominant, the 2 is more sort of, again, like more receptive, then that would be fine. But if you have a connection where the 2 is someone who is, likes to be in control or has, is very independent, that sort of thing. And then you have the 8 who is also likes to be in control, is more dominant, then that can, of course, you can butt heads. And also the 8 could come across as a little bit more insensitive to the needs of the 2. The 2 can be more highly sensitive. And so it can almost feel like the 8 is more like taking the lead 9 times out of 10. And if the 2 doesn't feel comfortable with that, that can, for a sense of identity, a sense of self, independence, that can create issues down the road. It can really create this sort of, again, point of contention where it comes to lacking an equal exchange of energy. The 2 would probably end up being the giver and the 8 would end up being the taker. And that can lead to, feeling taken advantage of by the 2 and etc. So again, it would need that the 8 would really need to be able to compromise very well. And the 2 would have to be able to express their needs and not be easily influenced by the 8. So there can be some power struggles there and some dynamics where the 2 could get very overwhelmed by the energy of the 8. The 8 is a big energy, and in its journey, it sort of needs to be risk-taking and in control to some degree, and having that confidence. And the 2 can struggle with that a little bit, and kind of get overwhelmed by it, and then be easily influenced by it, and then kind of lose their sense of autonomy. So it can be a little bit that can be a little bit difficult. Also, the 8 can feel like the 2 is too much in victim mode and not decisive enough, not ambitious enough, that sort of thing. And so again, it can kind of create some interesting dynamics and power struggles there. But again, nothing that conversations and communication can't overcome. But though it is a beautiful connection because it's part of that manifesting triad, and when the 2 can work together, dynamite. But getting to that point can be very difficult. And I would equate this connection to be one where in astrology, we might see a lot of oppositions or squares that would have to be overcome and managed in order to get to that point of dynamite. With the 2 and the 9, this can be, again, truly beautiful connection. This kind of reminds me of like the 2 and the 2 or the 2 and the 6, because the 9 is also very similar to the 2. It's a very giving, nurturing type of energy, right? So it takes into consideration basically everybody else. And part of the 9's journey is being the humanitarian, right? Taking into consideration other people's needs and supporting others, that sort of thing in a healthy way, but also figuring out their own sense of self and standing up for themselves and asserting themselves in a healthy way while also not losing sight of the needs of others. And the 2 is sort of in that similar situation. The 2 is, about relationships and bringing people together in harmony and peace and balance. And it's a very giving type of energy. And the journey of the 2 becomes one of, knowing, becoming more decisive and, again, standing up for themselves, going after their goals and that sort of thing without being easily influenced by the external. And so when you get the 2 and the 9 together, it can be a really beautiful connection because they would each understand the other, right? As far as when it comes to that giving nature, and that level of compassion. It's kind of like this union of the heart and compassion, right? But where there could be some points of contention or where it could get a little bit funky would be if they lose themselves within each other, right? If they lose their sense of self within the connection, there's not a lot of opportunity to, again, be independent, to assert yourself, to stand up for yourself. And so they can kind of get very comfortable in the comfortableness of the connection. And there's not a lot of sort of squares or oppositions or strong angles within this dynamic to push them outside of their comfort zone, to help them to strengthen that muscle of asserting themselves, being decisive, going after their goals, their dreams, becoming more independent, that sort of thing. And so that's the good thing about the points of contention, because it challenges us, it pushes us to, become that whole human. And, if we're in connections that are sort of only easy or accommodating or etc., that can kind of keep us from stepping into our greatest potential, so to speak. And so, but it can be a really beautiful connection, very supportive, very loving, very safe. They would just need to make sure that they don't lose themselves within each other and that they continue to maintain their own sense of identity and self and autonomy within the connection. And then it can be a truly healthy, beautiful connection. But also similar to the 2 and the 2 and the 2 and the 6, they would just want to make sure that there's an equal exchange of energy. It's not each party just kind of giving and neither kind of receiving, because that can lead to some degree of resentment. So the autonomy is the big piece here. Not losing yourself within the connection is going to be really, really important when it comes to 2 and 9 energy. Life path 3 with life path 3. So I always say that it's most difficult to have connections with the same life path, just because, especially if you're going through the same things at the same time or learning the same lessons in life at the same time, because it can work beautifully when you're figuring it out together, but a lot of times it can also, a lot of the insecurities can come up, a lot of the frustration can come out, and we can project that onto our partner, and it can be difficult. So, 3s often can suffer with debilitating self-doubt, especially early on in life, and as they, continue on to figure out who they are and how to express themselves and finding those creative outlets. And if you have 2 people who are moving through that extreme self-doubt, again, that can be challenging in a lot of ways. But with communication, that can be alleviated, and actually you can help each other out of it. So, again, it always comes down to the conversation and the communication to make sure that you're working through it in a healthy way. Also with 3s, they tend to be very sensitive. And so there can be a lot of emotional highs and lows. And as they continue on their journey to figure out how to best express their emotions, how to manage their emotions, It can be, again, those extreme highs and lows. And so if you have two people going through that at the same time, that can prove challenging. Also, threes can be be fearful of criticism and can tend to be more perfectionists, trying to get it exactly right so that they're not criticized, that sort of thing. And so if you have two people together who have insecurities, who are afraid of constructive criticism or any kind of criticism, that can be challenging. And a lot of times those insecurities can be projected outwards onto your partner, and that can be, again, create points of contention. Also, threes, when they're not in their higher octave, can be cynical and critical of themselves and of others. So if you get two people together who, again, are sort of in their shadow side and are very cynical and critical, that's going to come out on their partner or their friend or the other person, and that's going to be projected outwards, and that can definitely create some damage to the connection. And so again, it just comes back to making sure that the conversation is there. Both can also be very scattered at times. The three is a very creative energy, right? There's a lot of creativity flowing through the three. And so until they find the outlet for that expression, their energy can be really scattered and be difficult to focus for them. So again, you get two people together who have difficulties focusing. It can be it can create a lot of chaos within the connection. So, but beautiful side of the threes, two threes coming together, of course, like the dynamic for creativity, is astounding. I mean, what they can create together would be phenomenal. Their social networking and their ability to bring people together through creativity is phenomenal. So, and finding ways to emotionally express themselves and creatively express themselves, doing that together can bring a lot of optimism and a lot of joy into their lives and a lot of imagination. So, you get two creatives together, and what they can create can be profound. So it really is a beautiful connection, but there are definitely some difficulties that would have to be overcome, which would only strengthen the connection if they're able to do that. Life path 3 with life path 4, this can be for the most part a really solid connection. But where there can be some points of contention, at least, if both parties aren't in their higher octave or higher expression of their life paths, could be, the 3 can tend to be a little bit more scattered. There's a lot of creativity flowing through them. There's a lot of ideas and imagination running wild. And that sort of scatteredness could be a point of contention with the 4, who is typically more organized, strategic, very much like solution focused, very focused type of energy. And so the 3 might want to, is oftentimes more playful, more childlike, more sort of spontaneous. And the 4 is often more rigid, more, needs the plan. Now, they can balance each other out really, really well. And that's actually one of the aspects that makes it such a solid connection. However, if there's not the communication, if there's not the deeper understanding and the compromise and the finding common ground, the 4 could get very irritated with the 3's sort of scatteredness or flightiness, or sort of more childlike tendencies, not childish, more childlike, right? More playful tendencies, because the 4, again, can get serious real quick. And so that can be a little bit frustrating. And the 3 can get frustrated with the 4 because the 3 wants the 4 to be more playful and to lighten up a little bit and to enjoy life more and to think outside the box type of thing, which can be really difficult for the 4. So it can create that kind of miscommunication that can make it difficult for both people. However, on the flip side of that, what each of them can learn from the other can be really powerful and beautiful. The 3 can learn to be more focused and focus their energy on their creative pursuits and those creative outlets, and get serious about some of those creative outlets to see it through to completion. And the 4 could tap more deeply into their inner child, connect more with their inner child, think, be less rigid, think outside the box. So be a little bit less cynical. And less serious, not take life so seriously type of thing. So it can turn out to be a very solid, beautiful energy and connection, especially what the two can bring for each other. The 4 can help to ground the 3. The 3 can help to help the 4 to let their hair down and actually enjoy and experience life a little bit more. So for the most part, I think this is actually a really beautiful connection and can be really supportive and long withstanding. It's just making sure that there's conversation and communication about the differences in the love language. The 3 also can be kind of move through extreme emotions and can be highly emotive, whereas the 4 is very deep and has very strong emotions, but they can tend to feel a little bit more aloof. They can tend to not express their emotions so much. The 3 wears their heart on their sleeve. The 4 may not. And so again, it's just a difference in love languages that would just need to be addressed and communicated. But overall, beautiful connection, really. The 3 and the 5 together, every time I see someone who is a life path 3 and they're with a life path 5, I just think, man, that's got to be such a fun connection because, these are 2 really big, boisterous, joyful, freedom-seeking type of energies. I mean, the 5 is all about experiencing life with all their senses, not being overly restricted. It's a big energy. And the same thing with the 3. The 3, again, when it's in its higher octave, is very much connected to joy, their creativity, their inner child, their imagination, and travel. Both of these energies typically like to travel, so it can be such a fun connection, and really a beautiful connection. But where they can get into some trouble, and not so much with each other, but just sort of in life and on their own personal journeys when they're together, is, the 3 tends to be, again, more spontaneous, throw caution to the wind. It's a creative energy. The 5 is a freedom seeker. It wants change and to be progressive and to be unconventional and to not be, barred in. And so when the 2 get together, sort of moderation goes out the window, and they can, live beyond their means. They can live in excess. They can not have a whole lot of focus or follow through, seeing things through to completion, because both struggle with that, especially the 5. And so the focus isn't really there, and the groundedness isn't really there. It's sort of like it's kind of like 2 kind of air energies coming together, right? So there's not a lot of earth energy here. There's not a lot of groundedness, and that can create issues within the connection, just because it can create chaos within the connection and within their lives. And so again, really fun energies to have together, and what you could create together would be probably pretty profound and exciting and fun. And the experiences that you could have together would be just so fun. And so it really is such a beautiful connection, but you would just have to be careful about, it's kind of like when you get the 3 and the 5 together, there's no adult in the room type of thing. And so, a lot of fun can happen, but there's probably going to be a lot to clean up afterwards as well. And so you just want to be careful of that, just to make sure that not only are you spontaneous and impulsive at times, but that you are also metered and focused and have the follow through. So, that's really the biggest issue that would come, I think, in that connection, is both living, like encouraging each other to sort of live to extremes, and that can of course lead to burnout, etc. One thing I will say though is the 3 can tend to be extreme in their emotions, right? Especially early on. And so they can be, kind of reactive at times with their emotions. The 5 tends to be more independent and needs that sense of independence. So if the 5 thought the 3 was becoming too emotionally needy or too clingy or in victim mode or whatever the case may be, they may try to sabotage the connection because they're feeling suffocated and need their independence. But as long as both couples are showing up in their autonomy and their sense of self, it can be a really fun connection. Life Path 3 with Life Path 6. This is actually a really beautiful connection and a lot of harmonious aspects here. the six tends to be creative as well. It's good at beautifying spaces and using its creativity to beautify those spaces. And of course, the three is all about creativity. And so you get these two together, and if this is a partnership and you're living together, your house is probably really creative and beautiful and artsy and all of the things. And the six is a really nurturing, caregiving type of energy, and likes to support, right? And so it can be really nourishing for the three to be in this kind of connection with the six. The three can tend to be more social, more collaborative, more sort of on the outside, right? Like in the community, that sort of thing. And the six can tend to be more homebound a lot of times as well. So so this could be a point of contention as well. If you have a six who's more sort of introverted or likes to be more at home, rather than being highly social, that can be a point of contention, because the three can tend to be, again, more social, like to have those social interactions and collaborations. And the six can tend to be a little bit more of a homebody at times. So that could be a little bit of a point of contention. The three might want to go out and play, and the six might be like, let's stay home and watch a movie or something like that. So again, just communication and conversation and compromise, making sure that each party is getting what they need. The other thing is, they can actually be really beautiful, but could also be a point of contention early on or until, emotional maturity is reached. But the three does tend to have, is a very emotive energy, but so is the six. The six also feels deeply and has deep emotions. The three, though, is on a journey of emotional maturity and learning how to not only like manage their emotions, but to channel those emotions into something creative and constructive. And the six can also feel really, really deeply and be very emotive. But a lot of times the six, that energy comes out as like perfectionism or needing to control the environment. And they can become sort of like the partner who is mistrustful or who needs to sort of control their partner in order to make sure that they're safe and make sure that everything is okay. And that can be a little bit suffocating for the three, and obviously unhealthy in other ways as well. So again, it's just about, when you have two healthy, two whole individuals coming together, this can be a really beautiful, nurturing, supportive connection, creative as well. But when there's still work to be done, it can be, the six can come across as a little bit overbearing and controlling, and it's with the best intentions. It's just to make sure that the three stays safe and that sort of thing. But the three can feel a little bit claustrophobic maybe, and need a little bit more space than what the six might be willing to give. So again, it's just a matter of understanding each other's love languages and having those conversations. But overall, really beautiful energy. Also, the six can help to bring out the true nature of the three, right? Because the six is such a nurturing, supportive type of energy. And so that can help the three to feel safe to be themselves in that environment. And that can also bleed into their how they present externally as well. So that can be really beautiful and positive. With Life Path 3 and Life Path 7 coming together, this can be a really beautiful, very spiritual, very deep connection. I do like how the 7 can bring, again, that element of spirituality, sort of opening up the 3 to their more spiritual nature, can enhance the creativity of the 3. And that can be really beautiful. The 3 can bring sort of bringing the 7 out of its shell and into more social aspects can be really beneficial for the 7, who tends to be a little bit more of, at times, a lone wolf, a loner, someone who is more comfortable sort of being more introverted, more going within than without type of thing. And so the 7 or the 3 can bring that, can get them out of their comfort zone, can get the 7 out of their comfort zone a bit. So that can be really powerful and really beautiful. And yeah, just the two coming together, and the creativity and the spiritual element, as well as, the 7 is really good about bringing ideas to life, taking the inspiration and turning it into something tangible. And that's right up the three's alley. So again, it's like a business partnership or a partnership where you are creative together. This can be a really kind of a powerhouse, underestimated couple and dynamic. Now, where there could be some points of contention, typically the three tends to be more social, tends to be more outgoing, tends to be more collaborative and in their approach, is a little bit more, is a bigger energy, right? It's just a big, boisterous type of energy. The seven can be a little bit more serious, a little bit more reserved, a little bit more sort of hard to read, hard to open up, right? Because the seven is a lot of times going within, needs time for solitude, needs their alone time, can be like almost hyper independent at times. And so the three may be a lot for the seven to digest, so to speak, because again, the seven kind of needs that alone time and downtime to regenerate, right? To like recoup and rest. And there's just a lot going on internally with the seven. And so they need that time to be able to process. And that can be a little bit frustrating for the three, who tends to be a little bit more outgoing and sort of spontaneous and fly by the seat of your pants type thing. It can, again, be wonderful to bring the seven out of their shell. But, again, if the three is not in it's not in its higher octave of the three, then it can almost be a little bit too scattered, a little bit too spontaneous, a little bit too like larger than life for the seven at times. And that can create a point of contention. So again, just that deeper understanding, the conversations, both, being sure to communicate what is needed in order for each to feel good in the connection, will go a long way. The other thing I would say is, the three can have extreme emotions, and until they figure out how to manage those emotions and sort of channel them into something more creative and constructive. And the seven also is highly emotive. It's a very intense, deep energy. And a lot of the journey is working through those emotions and managing those emotions. But also the seven can struggle a lot with trust. This is a lifetime of learning to trust. And so there could be some points of contention, especially if the three is very social and kind of, is out late or whatever. There could come some, if there isn't open communication and that trust there, that can be a point of contention. So just some things that could come up within that dynamic. Life Path 3 and Life Path 8. This also is a really interesting dynamic and actually could be a really good like power couple, especially with the creativity of the 3 and sort of the expertise and the business-minded leadership of the 8 coming together. If this is a business partnership, it would probably do very, very well, especially reaching goals, achieving success, that sort of thing, especially coming from the individuals or the partnership's vision, greater vision, and making that a reality. Very, very powerful energies coming together here. The 3 sort of has the creativity to bring the vision of either the 8 or the 3 to life. And the 8 sort of is the risk taker, the one who would kind of really push to make that happen, right? Has the focus and the drive and the ambition to really bring it to life. So really has like kind of that powerhouse, power couple type of energy. Now, some places where there could be some not conflict, but points of contention would be, the 3 tends to be a little bit more scattered, especially when it's in its lower energy. It can be less focused, has a lot going on, right? As far as like creativity and like thoughts and ideas. And so that can be a little bit frustrating for the 8, who tends to be or needs to be more focused and driven and steadfast in their sort of, approach to bringing their vision to life. And so the 8 could see the 3 as a little bit non-committal or too flighty or just not as strong in the follow through, so to speak. And the 3 could get a little bit frustrated with the 8 because the 8 is too serious or too controlling or too sort of like too focused on money, power, status, influence, where the 3 is like, I just want to have fun. I just want to create. I just want to enjoy life. I just want to be me type of thing. And the 8 is like striving for success. And so there can kind of be that disconnect there that obviously would need to be kind of worked through. But again, if both are in their higher octaves, this can be a really beautiful partnership. But if both are still in their kind of their lower octaves, the 8 needs to have, or tends to need to have, control, power type things. So there can definitely be some power struggles. The 3 just wants to, again, be free, have fun, be creative with not a lot of restrictions. And in those power dynamics, sometimes it can be a little, the 8 can tend to be a little bit more controlling of the situation. So that can be a little bit frustrating for both. And again, the 8 might have times where they're looking at the 3 and saying, you need to get serious, what's your focus type thing. And, that can kind of put a damper on things. But again, the conversation is going to make or break the connection and the ability to have those conversations about what the needs are. One thing I really do like about this connection, though, is, again, the 3 can help the 8 to step into their joy and not be so hyper-focused on success, money, power, status, influence, etc. And the 8 can help the 3 to get more focused and to follow their, ambition and to see things through to completion and to get focused on 1 or 2 things as opposed to a million different creative projects. So that can be really beneficial. The other thing is, the 3 can be very sensitive, highly emotional, and until they are able to manage those emotions, they can come off as very needy or clingy or sort of very cynical and critical at times. And the 8 suffers with lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, fear of taking risks, that sort of thing, which it needs to overcome within its own journey. And so if they're with a partner who's hypercritical, that can be really detrimental to them and their own personal journey as well. Or if, again, the 3 is not able to regulate their emotions or manage their emotions in a healthy way, and the 8 is more controlling, then it just creates an unhealthy dynamic. Life Path 3 and Life Path 9, this is really a beautiful connection. Not a whole lot of points of contention with this connection. There are a couple, though. And when the 3 is in its lower expression, it can be fearful of criticism. It can be highly critical of self and others. It can have a lot of sort of debilitating self-doubt. It can also become cynical and critical. And this is interesting because the same can be said for the 9. So if you have these 2 individuals coming together in some capacity and they're both in their lower sort of vibrations, then you have 2 people who are very critical of each other, who are very cynical, who are fearful of being criticized, and they have a lot of insecurities, and they're projecting those insecurities and expecting the other person to fix those insecurities. So it just becomes a very very difficult connection, actually. And then if you've got 2 people who have a lot of self-doubt and, again, a lot of insecurities, the other person is not going to be able to cure those insecurities for the person. And it can just be very, very tense and difficult. Now, if both are in their higher octaves, of course, then you've got creativity meeting compassion, right? And, the 9 is a humanitarian. So it's always looking to, again, when it's in its higher vibration, it's always looking for ways that it can help the humanity, right? The collective. And the 3 brings the creativity, the solutions, the ideas, also the social aspect. That's the one thing, too, that can be beautiful here, is because the 9 can tend to be, through its experiences of life, more withdrawn, more isolated, or feel more isolated. And the 3 can really bring in that sense of community and kind of push the 9 outside of its comfort zone and really encourage it to get more involved within its community. And or the 3 can bring the community, right? So that can be really, really uplifting and open the 9 up to greater relations, which can be really beautiful. If the 2 are in their higher octaves, then you have people who are very optimistic, who are, the 3 being very connected to their inner child and their imagination and their joy and their creativity, which just brings a lot of optimism and idealism. Same thing with the 9. When the 9 is in its higher octave, it's a very compassionate, empathetic, forgiving, wanting to connect with people and connect people together type of energy. And so you get those 2 together, it's a very idealistic connection and can do a lot of good in the world, actually. So again, if this is like a business relationship, there's so much good that can be done with this connection. Even if it's a romantic relationship, this would be a very nurturing, fun, beautiful type of energy. Now, again, where there can be some points of contention would be the 9 can get serious very quickly, right? There's a lot of pressure on the 9. There's a lot of seriousness about the 9. And so, they can be very in their thoughts and just go from joy to seriousness very quickly. And the 3 is a very uplifting, very joyful, very spontaneous, very boisterous type of energy. And so the 3 could get bummed out by the 9's seriousness, or they're, just wanting them to sort of lighten up a little bit. And the 9 could get a little bit frustrated by the 3's sort of lack of seriousness or lack of focus, because a lot of times the 3, again, there's so much going on, so they can be quite scattered. And that the 9 could get frustrated with the 3's lack of focus and lack of seriousness, right? And so, however, with good communication and compromise and all of those things, the 3 can help the 9 to not take life so seriously and to connect more deeply with their own inner child. And the 9 can help the 3 get more focused and to get a little more serious about certain aspects of their life. And so they really do complement each other really, really well. And that's what I mean when I say, like, where there's these points of contention, it's actually just challenging us to become the best version of ourselves. But it's not always easy to kind of move through the challenges that will help us to do that. But the 3 can absolutely help the 9 be less cynical, less rigid, less serious. And the 9 can help to infuse some of that into the 3. So it can really balance both energies out beautifully. And then you've got this beautiful combination of, again, creativity, social activity, connectivity, collaboration, along with the 9, which brings the humanitarianism, the compassion, the empathy, that sort of thing. So really beautiful, beautiful connection once you get through those sort of deeper points of contention.